Hello everyone, this is Valiant, and I am coming to you with a guide on the new adventure mode. This adventure mode is called, pardon me, Shadows over Hercopolis. And, it's took a lot longer to beat this one for me than, the last adventure that was similar, taking place in Hercopolis. Um, it took way longer, mainly because of two big things, in my opinion. A, it takes a lot longer to make progress in this mode. Like, you can't farm the mode as easily because the mode is overall longer. And second, it's way harder to get items that you need in this mode. So, keeping those two things in mind, you will not beat the first boss for a while if you're running parties that are all empty gear. It takes quite a bit. It took me about 30 runs before I was able to beat it the first try uh, for the first time. But to be fair, about 20 of those runs were when we had like all green items and we were just waiting for the bug fix to come out for them to allow you to buy items from the blacksmith, which kind of sucked, having no ability to buy the items from the blacksmith at all. So it's a lot more difficult of an adventure than before. But there are, of course, gods who are better in it than others. So this video is going to be two parts. First of all, I'm going to go over the gods who I think are good in this mode. The ones who I've seen picked a lot that I don't think are good in this mode. And the gods, and then the second part of this video, the second part of this video is gonna be basically showing a video of me and a party I formed running the entire PTS through. Now, let me note now, if you're watching this after the patch went live, this is on PTS, so they only had normal mode, and they only had the first two bosses available. So we were not able to go past the first two bosses, but we did beat the first two bosses. And I'm gonna give you the mechanics and details on each of those in the second half of this video. So on this first part, I'm gonna go over which gods I think are really good in this mode and which are not so good in this mode. I'm not gonna go through every single god in the list. I'm gonna go over the ones that I've seen picked up, that I'm gonna go over the ones I think people think are good that aren't, basically. So, and the ones that, of course, in my opinion, are good. So, first of all, Discordia. I see her picked all the time. To be fair, I think part of it is bloated by the fact that she's new. That's probably the biggest reason why she was getting picked all the time in PTS. But she is not good for this. The reason I say she's not good for this is because her ult only hits gods. So her ult does no damage to minions, first of all. Second of all, everyone would think, oh, Strife, she can turn the minions against each other. Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, it would be in theory, but disclaimer here, I'm only talking about like early on when you don't have all these items. If you've got max build, you can run pretty much any of the gods on this entire list and you'll do all right, just because you have so much damage at that point. Like, that's the same case with Discordia. If you got a lot of items, you'll do fine because Strife will deal a lot of damage and it'll turn the minions against each other, great. But it's underrated, I mean, it's overrated when it comes to using Discordia when you have little to no items. When you have little to no items, Strife does no damage pretty much to minions. It doesn't clear wave very effectively. I mean, it turns them against each other, but I mean, it's only for 1 second, doesn't really help overall too much. And this unruly magic ability, it's kind of risky because of the fact that it can accidentally spread the projectiles and bring other minions over into your fight that you don't want in your fight, and that can be problematic, I've noticed. So don't play Discordia. She sounds good on paper. I have not seen her work well in practice. I would recommend against her. AMC, great god. Great god. He works great in this mode. You just have to play smart with him. Be careful about falling off of edges and stuff like that. But aside from that, he works great. His hives give you the max passive out the gate. So even if you have no items, you still have that great attack speed from the hives, and you got great movement speed. He's got pretty solid damage overall because of the bees, and everything's gonna just sit in his honey, so that deals a lot of tick damage, which is nice. His ult actually does deal damage if you throw it through minions, even though it usually you'd think it hits a god, but in this case it can deal damage passing through minions and such. Upwash I've seen picked up a few times. I would say no, bad idea, just because of the fact that mana consumption is a thing. So steer clear of Upwash, in my opinion. Amaterasu, I've seen picked up quite a bit. She is very good. I would say she's not very good right out the gate with no items. But once you get, like, in that middle range, when you're, like, between the first, like, you've made progress between the first boss, you've been able to beat the first boss, but you're struggling to get to the second. Amaterasu is great at that point, because at that point you've got, like, maybe 2, 3, good, tier 2 or 3 items, and she can really capitalize off that, especially if you've got items that benefit her. She works well off attack speed because she can get her passive off, and that's really good for your team's overall damage. And her 1 is really good for giving your team mobility in the sections where you need mobility, as you'll see in the second part of this video. And she also gives that power buff, which is nice. It's all good stuff. And she's also one of the gods who's really good at taking the bombs in the first part before the boss, which you'll see in the video after this. But anyways, yeah, Amaterasu, great pick. Usually I would recommend against it up until you beat the first boss. Once you beat the first boss, then go for Ama picks. She's great. Next up is Honor. Honor is similar place with Amaterasu. Once you got some items under your belt, Honor is really good. Up until then, he's okay. Not great. Anubis, same deal. Once you get items under your belt, he's great. Until then, not so much. In fact, even once you do have items under your belt, there is one section on the second, before the second boss, there's the boiler room, and that area is really rough on Anubis simply because he does not have that much movement speed or mobility in the form of dashes or leaps, which is where he can struggle, but aside from that, he does alright. Aphrodite, great healer. One thing you'll notice is gods with high sustain are going to be my top picks for when you first start out. Like AMC has those highs giving him healing early on. So when you have no items, you need sustain of some sort. You need either something to give you mana, because mana is going to be a problem, or you need someone to heal you, preferably both. Aphrodite, she has a bit of mana problems, but she's a great healer. She's really good at healing whoever's tanking the first boss. I mean, overall, I think she's great. I will say that she's better up until the first boss. She starts to be more unwieldy on the path to the second boss, because the path to the second boss has so many minions and you end up using so many abilities that it ends up burning through your mana pretty effectively, so you may end up sitting around waiting a bit for her mana to regen. But short of that, up until the first boss, she works fine. And the first boss she does well on too. I would say Aphrodite's a good pick. She's a good pick. Apollo is banned, I believe, so we're not even gonna mention him. Yeah, Apollo's banned. So yeah, of course he's not gonna be played. Arachne, I have seen a lot of people pick up Arachne. Personally, I don't think she's that great of a pick, because she's one of those gods who works well off of items. One of the things that I think people pick Arachne for is they think they can carry the bomb across the ledge by ulting, and therefore you're over the ice and stuff like that. That is a big mistake. You actually have to pass over the surface area that you're trying to pass over, because if you don't, Arachne will actually fall off her ult and die in the pit, which seems weird when I say it, but you know what I mean if you accidentally try it. So I would recommend against Arachne. She's not the worst pick. I think she's actually decent because she's got good single target damage. She can stun the mini bosses, which is helpful. Lowers the amount of times they'll use their special attacks. But at the same time, I think there's better picks. I don't think she's worth it. I'd steer clear of Arachne, in my opinion. Ares, I haven't seen picked. Artemis, I've seen picked sometimes. She's good, but she's one of those gods I think you need items. She has natural crit though, which does make up for it a bit. I still think she needs a lot of items to make her good. So I'd say she's only really good once you've got at least 3, 4, maybe even more items online. Artio, I have not seen picked up as much as I thought I would. Artio sounds good on paper, but at the same time, now that I'm thinking about it, her mana consumption would be ridiculous, so she would struggle a lot in that regards. So probably best to steer clear of R2. I have seen Athena picked up a few times. She's okay, but I think she's not that great overall because Taunt is useless. So yeah, Athena's probably better on not being picked. The Wheelix haven't seen, Box haven't seen. Bakasura, I would say Bakasura is really good. I used the Bakasura for a while, and the main reason is because when you have a problem early on, like when you have no items, early on, using his 3 ult combo on an entire group of minions is just such ridiculously good clear. If you have trouble on this one group of minions that just keeps wiping your party early on, when you have no items, Bakasura is the pick for you, because he will just shred that group almost instantly. When you've got those emergencies, when you accidentally pulled a few too many minions at once, Bakasura will clean them all out. Bakasura is great in the early game. I think he'd be... He falls off later on, in my opinion, just because of the fact that he's melee. But short of that, he's great in every other regards. He deals great damage. I think it's because his 3's buff works even without items, and he also gets a free power buff, I believe. Let me see. Yeah, he gets free 30 power just for having this at max rank, which is great. Yeah, Bakasura is a great starting pick, in my opinion. Bastet, too mana hungry, never see her. Bellona, really mana hungry, but if you have a specific god I'll get to in a bit, she can work because her cleave on her hammer is ridiculously good for clearing minions. Pretty much the gods with cleaves in general are gonna be great. They get better as they get items, so I would say Bellona isn't the best with no items, but she's decent once you've got at least a few items. Kabrakan haven't seen. Kamazots, I have not seen Kamazots, but I do think he might be good in theory. I think there's better picks though, so overall I would steer clear of it. There's no point in going for that. Cernunnos, great pick. Enough said. He's got free lifesteal in his kit, he's got free pen in his kit, he's literally got a ton of things in his kit that you normally need items for, but you get for free. Cernunnos, excellent pick, you can't go wrong with him, even out the gate. No items, he'll still do fine. Chaac, same deal. No items, he'll still do fine. His mana sustain is great, his health sustain is great, he's got that passive that boosts his ability to use his abilities even without mana, so all top-notch stuff. His ult is great for clearing groups. I mean, he's got good base damage, which is why he's really good. He's to be honest, Chaac, I'd never see picked up after you have like tier 3 items. But when you don't have any items, Chaac is a great pickup. Because Chaac is one of those gods who works excellently with no items. There are few gods that do, he's one of them. Chang'e, not worth it early on because she needs items to really be effective. But once you get a lot of items under your belt, then she's a great healer. But early on, I wouldn't go Chang'e, she'll burn through her mana way too quickly. Chiron, I have not seen picked. Kronos is banned from this mode because of his ultimate, I'm guessing. Chu Chulainn. Chu Chulainn's is great early on, and again, it's a similar deal with Chaac. Great base damage. He's got that AoE aura around him most of the time. He gets to stack up his passive all the time, which makes it so that he can go berserk a lot. I mean, he goes berserk a lot early on, and he just kind of shreks because his base damage in berserk form is ridiculously high. So yeah, Chu Chulainn's great pick for when you're first starting out, but his biggest drawback is the fact that he does not have a self-heal. If you're able to bring a healer with him like Aphrodite or Hel, then you'll be fine. But short of that, same with Bellona. Bellona needs an Aphrodite or Hel to back her up usually. Especially when you've got no items, you need a healer backing you up. Cupid haven't seen. Yeah, he's available. He's just I don't think he's that good. Daji, she's actually available, but her ult does nothing to minions, so, I mean, I mean, I could see her maybe dealing some damage, but I wouldn't recommend it until she's got items. Erlang Shen is banned, and I think justfully so, because he is OP as all heck. He was OP in the last adventures. He was literally the most broken character. You could literally go through the entire adventure and solo it with Erlang Shen, because Erlang Shen was just that strong. But now he's been banned, rightfully so. He's crazy. Fafnir, no. Fenrir, you know, I don't even know if you can pick him. Yeah, you can. But, no, too much mana consumption. Freya, too much mana consumption. She would be great if you had a lot of items, but like I said before, if you got a lot of items, we're ignoring that fact because you'd pretty much do well with everybody. Ganesh, surprisingly, I will say, I've seen him once played, and he did excellently when he was played. He's one of those picks who you don't think would be good because his silence doesn't really do anything. I mean, it can stop them from using their ability, which some of these mini-bosses do have, but it's still not worth it. It's his ultimate that's really good. If you place your Ganesh ult well, you can insta-clear a lot of things, you can deal a ton of damage to the bosses. It's great. It's good base damage. That's what I think makes it so good. Geb, not good. Don't bother. Guan Yu, I think Guan Yu is decent. I wouldn't recommend him primarily because his mana consumption is ridiculously high. And he doesn't really have any way to gain mana in any way, so that's his biggest drawbacks. If you got Hell with him, then you're fine, but then it's like, why would you get Guan Yu? Because if you got Hell, you've already got healing. It's like, yeah. Don't bother usually. Hachiman, his ult can't hit anything. His 2 is decent, but aside from that, it doesn't really help too much. His dash is okay, but it's really short range. He doesn't really have anything going for him. I mean, late game, once you get build, of course. But yeah, late game ADC, of course. Hades is not available in this mode, which I'm surprised by. I thought I saw some streamers playing him earlier. He might have been banned recently, like they might have just hotfix banned him, probably because he heals so effectively off of groups of minions. Hard to say though. Anyways, Hebo, mana consumption, nah. Okay, so Hell is pretty much the god of this mode. There's really no reason not to pick her. She's great in pretty much every phase of this adventures. She does excellently with no items, she does excellently with few items, she does excellently with a lot of items. Pretty much the only time you don't want to be picking her is when everyone's got all the items and you got lifesteal on your ADCs, you got lifesteal on your mages, and you're good. But up until that point, Hell is great. She gives that passive MP5. She's got that sustain for the team as a whole. You got pretty much all the good things with Hell. She's got the free CC immunity. Unfortunately, I will note the CC immunity doesn't work on quite a few aspects of the map for some reason. Like the ice it doesn't work on, and it makes sense that it doesn't because then Hell would literally break the game because everyone could ignore the ice. But it doesn't work also on some knockbacks that the bosses have that I've noticed, which is peculiar. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. They might change it before they release it on live, but I'm not sure. It's probably intentional. But yeah, her healing is excellent. She gives great group heals. And also a great thing is when you're doing the boiler room stage, she's extremely effective in being able to CC immune the slow for her team and then speed boosting the entire team. And that's extremely invaluable for that particular section. It helps out a lot. Overall, she's just a great god. Hercules is not available in this mode. Ho Yi, I've seen him picked up. I don't see why. I mean, he's really not worth it in my opinion. His ult's okay, but aside from that, his ricochet doesn't deal as much damage because they already nerfed it, so he can't get multiple bounces. It's hard to get multiple bounces off on this map anyways, and he doesn't get the bonus damage even if he does. So there's really no reason to pick him. I mean, he's an ADC in the end, so I mean, you could pick him for that sole reason, but aside from that, no reason. I've seen Unbots played. I don't think he does that well overall, in my opinion. He's got decent base damage, and he does have some free crits every so often. But overall, I don't think it makes him worth it, in my opinion. Isis I have not seen played, so I can't really speak. Izanami, she is banned, understandably so. She kind of broke the last mode when she was available. So yeah, it's understandable they banned her. Giannis is banned, Global Ult, Jingwei is banned, because passive probably breaks things, I'm not sure. Kali I've seen played a few times. I wouldn't recommend her early on because she's one of those gods who works really well with items. If she doesn't have items, then she doesn't work that well. So early on, she really can't affect fights that much, so there's no reason to pick her really. Khepri, there's really no reason to pick him. You got Rez, but aside from that, you've got pretty much nothing else to really help your team with other than tanking stuff, but in that case, it's like, you could just pick someone else. Kokol Khan, he's great once you get items. You need mana. We're just gonna skip over these guys who I don't think are even worth mentioning. Most of them it's mana problems generally, or abilities that just don't help at all. Naja I will note because I've seen that picked up a few times. Because people think, oh, the crit off his passive. Yeah, sure, he's got passive crit, but his ult is useless, his 3 is useless. He doesn't bring enough to the table to make him worth picking up. Neith too mana hungry, I won't recommend playing her. Even with a Hell, she's got pretty mediocre base damage on her basic attacks. I mean, she's got great ability damage, that's for sure, but overall, I feel like you're better off picking Cernunnos or on her. If you're gonna go in ADC. Nemesis, not great. No reason to pick her. Her ult doesn't do anything. Nike, she's really good in the middle stage of the game. I don't see her picked up that much, but her passive is really good for the team, and she can do quite a lot in the way of tanking for the team. But at the same time, like, Amma can do pretty much the majority of the things that she can do, but Amma can also give that damage buff to 15% damage buff against the enemy you're targeting. So I think Amma is actually like basically a better Nike in that regards, but Nike is still great. Nox, no reason to pick her. You're gonna silence these minions and you can't root them with the one, so no reason. Nuwa, don't bother. Odin, too mana hungry. Cyrus, great once you got items because of cleave attacks, but until then he doesn't really do much. Poseidon, no reason to pick him. Ra, he's a great substitute for Hell, because his mana consumption isn't crazy, and he can heal his team pretty effectively while damaging the minions, so he's good in that regards, and he's got great damaging abilities. He's a good replacement for Hell, but again, like I said, it's a replacement for Hell early on, I would say. Hell I still think is better, but yeah, he can do well. He can do well. If you really hate playing Hell and you want to change the pace, go for Ra. Ra is probably the next best. Unless you want to go Aphrodite, but Aphrodite is limited on single target heals. Raijin, no reason to pick him. Ram can't pick. Ratosker can't pick. Rav, no reason to pick him. Scylla needs items. Serket needs items. Scotty, no reason to pick her over the other ADCs, but I mean, she does have Calder, so I guess that does make her decent early on. Not great though, I'd say. Sobek, no reason to pick him. I don't think, to be honest, there's very few tanks who I would... In fact, I can't really think of any tanks I would say are actually worth picking in this mode. Well, other than Ganesh. Ganesh is like one of the few just because his ultimate's so good. I'd lean away from going for Guardians. Just go for Warriors if you really need a tanky character. Or just go all squishies, you can do fine with all squishies. Soul, great pick, great pick. If she's basically the magical ADC in this game mode, in every sense of the word. You pretty much just run her if you happen to have a lot of magical items and not a lot of physical items, and you need an ADC, just pick Soul. Soul does great consistent damage. Her 1 is really useful when you're running away from creeps. You can use her 3 when running away from creeps. Her 3 is extremely valuable when you're doing the boiler room. She can use her ult on the dams in the boiler room. She's It's great. In every regard, Sol can do really well. Son of Wukong, no reason to pick him. Susanna, no, he's banned for some reason. I don't know why. Sylvanas, I mean, Sylvanas could probably do alright, but, I mean, why play him when you could play Ra or Hel or Aphrodite, all of which can do his job better, basically. Terra, same deal. Thor, you can't pick. Morgan, you can't pick. Thanatos, you can't pick. Thoth, he's not that great in this mode. I'd recommend against it. Tyr sounds good early on, and you would think he does well because he can knock people off the edge, well, knock these creeps off the edge and stuff like that. And yeah, he can do that, but aside from that, he's got pretty much nothing else going for him. Like, later on, when you're trying to actually do boss fights, he can't really do much. Ull, he's great early on because he's got really good base damage on his abilities, but he has mana consumption problems. If you're running him with a Hel, you're fine. So if you want to run an ADC that's not on her or Cernunnos, Ull's fine. Avamna, not great. I've seen him played once. He was okay at best, but I don't think he's worth it overall. Vulcan needs items to be effective. Xbalanque, there's no reason to pick him. Jingtian can actually do pretty well, just especially on the first boss fight. Not so well on the second boss fight, but he does do well on the first boss fight, mainly because he can stop those heals so effectively. He can pretty much single-handedly take care of all the heals, blocking all the heals for the boss, just because he can double leap on them, which is really effective. Ymir doesn't have enough mobility to be good. Zeus does not have mobility, so he'll suck in the second stages of the game, where Boiler Room in particular I'm thinking of. He'll do terrible on that. But up until then, his base damage is high enough so that he can be run pretty effectively early on. The thing you gotta watch out for though is mana consumption. You want to run a Hel with him, otherwise he's just gonna burn through his mana pretty darn quick. Zhongqi, decent. I don't think there's any reason to pick him. I haven't seen him picked, but I could see how he could be good. His ult would be kind of useless aside from the protections it gives though, so aside from that, I wouldn't pick him. Anyways, we're gonna go on to the second part of the video now. Bear in mind, I am not the best at editing videos, but I will try my best, and I'll go over I'll basically be going over a round we did of going through it all. We did complete it, and this is like the third time we completed it, I believe. So I'll be back in a moment. Alright, so we ended up picking Cernunnos, Hel, and Sol this time round. Basically 2 carries. This was one of our lair runs. This was not our first run that we actually finished it. We finished it 2 times before this, and we got such good items from it. It became like really stupid easy because we got a Malice on my part. We had our Sol having a Tahuti, you know, and it just racks up the power pretty quickly, and it made the fight a bit easier than it was supposed to be. So I do think you can finish it sooner than that, because we did it. So I was playing Hel though, and I have more items for Hel than I do for ADCs. I just figured since I had Malice, might as well use it. So pretty much the tactics when it comes to these sword fights. Early on, you won't have too much, so we're gonna be nuking stuff here, but as you can see. But when you're first starting out, what you're gonna want to be aware of is whatever items you do have, try and use those. But you're gonna want to be careful with these fights. You won't want to stack them up like we end up doing a lot of. We stack them up quite a bit, as you can see up here. But what you'll want to do is fight them individually. Also, early on, you gotta be careful of the mini-boss's mechanics, like the giant bird there that you saw briefly before we killed it. I mean, she kind of engaged it earlier. It'll knock you back, so you do have to be careful when you're near edges, otherwise it will throw you off the edge, and that can end your day quickly. I think I actually died to getting thrown off an edge here in a minute. But you gotta be aware of these mini bosses. They're all gonna have their own special little mechanics, and they all have their own little tricks. No, not here. Never mind. I actually didn't die on this run. Never mind. This guy, pretty much the big thing you gotta watch out for is that big explosion attack. Now, there's two ways to counter that. I didn't fulfill either because I'm OP at this point. You gotta be either you can counter jump it, see, or dash through it or dash out of it. If you don't have a jump or a dash, then you probably shouldn't be tanking it, or you should be someone who can tank it, because early on that deals a lot of damage. It may not look like it on this video, but it does deal a lot of damage to you when you first start out. Now, you may have noticed that we did go by some of that area where it blows you off. There's going to be another one up ahead. You are going to want to be careful of that. Usually someone like Hell can actually just immune it if she needs to, or Soul can also immune it. Be very careful though if you're going to try and go over that using an ult like Arachne, for example. With Arachne's ult, we've noticed that if you accidentally try and cut the corner, you fall down out of the ult. Don't ask me how that's a thing, but it's a thing. So you actually gotta follow the path perfectly with Arachne's ult, otherwise you'll fall off. It seems dumb, but yeah. Anyways, right here, we have to stand on the 3 pedestals, and then you get all these monsters breaking out of the ice blocks. Well, I'm not paying attention, but you do have to be careful that you'll get swarmed here a bit. Now, what you'll be tempted to do, now what you couldn't really see there, I'm just going to briefly talk about, is there was enemies on the other side of the bridge. What you want to do is go around to the side so that it doesn't see you and it jumps off the bridge. There's a little wall on your right side that you probably saw earlier, and you can just go there to protect yourself. Now here, this sort of a minion will spawn more minions until you kill him. He's a bit of a problem early on, but if you focus him out and don't bother with the low minions, you shouldn't have a problem. Now here's where things get interesting. This is where you gotta pick up a bomb and carry it to 4 different points. So basically 2 different points, but you gotta carry it to them, each of them twice. Now you gotta be careful on this ice. You gotta go at it straight on so that you hit that angle and bounce off nicely. And then you gotta pretty much just run straight into that. Don't be too slow on doing it, because the bomb will go off early otherwise, and you might die. Just be careful of the falling platforms. Just gotta be quick about it, pretty much. But just make sure you go at it on straight lines, and you'll be good. Your teammates, however, during this time will be killing things. So the faster that you get through it, the sooner you can help them out. Early on, this area is really a pain, especially for the 2 people who are trying to hang out and destroy things, because if you have no items, it can be really hard. But overall, if you've got Hell backing you up, you should be fine. You should overall be able to pull it off pretty easily. Now, pretty much, there is no difference, just in case any of you are wondering. There is no difference if you go the bomb both on one side or both on the other side, and or just go one on each side and then one on each side again. It doesn't make any difference. I just pick arbitrarily. It literally makes no difference. I don't think it saves any time in particular. I don't think it does anything. Yeah, so don't worry too much about it. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is on this ice, you might notice there's ice spikes coming up. Don't stress too much about those. They do very little damage, so unless you're like crazy low on health, you should be alright, and it shouldn't be an issue. Just worry about it if you're low on health. Then you gotta time it a bit better just to avoid the ice spikes, but it's really not hard to avoid them. I just tend to ignore them because they deal so little damage that they're usually not worth fretting over. It might be different in hard mode. It might actually be way more significant damage in hard mode, but as this is PTS, it's much more difficult to determine that. Also, you'll notice I just got hit by some spikes at the edge there. You do want to be careful about that, because they can slow you and it can mess you up if you're about to go on the falling platforms. If you're too slow, you can accidentally just fall down. So you want to be careful about that, and you want to go straight on pretty much. What I like to do is if I'm playing a character with a dash or jump, I'll jump the last little section on the way there and the way back if I can. Or dash it, as you saw there. Pretty much with these fights, the bosses are not very difficult. I mean, the first one was just one of the harpies, like this. The second one was just a couple of wolves. Pretty much with the wolves, just group them up and nuke them with everything. Usually, ulting those two wolves makes it really easy, especially when you're first starting out. And the third time, as you saw, it was another one of those harpies, but I'm not sure if you could see, but behind me, my teammates were taking care of the archer. There's also an archer in that group. So he's annoying, but I'd say group up the harpy with the archer and then hit them with your AoEs. That's usually the best way to deal with those early on. Also, this last phase, there's a lot of ranged attackers, so just try and take out the ranged attackers first, group up the melees so that you can take them out. But this one ends with one of those big guys that slams down and has all those ice spikes come out of the ground. So, as I said, if you've got someone with a leap, especially, when you see him casting that, just jump straight in place and you'll be fine. If you've got a dash, same deal. I think my teammates just killed him before I was able to deal with the ads in time. Yeah, it's kind of a bit weird seeing this much. But this is mainly just showing you the full run-through for purposes of guide. Anyways, we carry on. It's fairly a straightforward fight. Just be aware, like, right after you beat that fourth fight, that right after you pick up your potions, there's two more bosses, as you saw there. You can pretty much just nuke him. Usually you'll have your ult up again if you used your ult on the wolf stage, which in my opinion, that's the optimal way to use your ult there. Use it on the wolf stage and then use it on that very last stage. Make sure you don't accidentally use it on the big guy. That seems like it's the last stage, but it's not. And Soul nearly died here, but fortunately we were able to keep her up. Dying as little as possible is good, but when you're first starting out, I will say this. Making more progress and getting more chests is also good. So what you want to be careful of is if you're too low, like if your team's out of mana and you either don't have a hell or you've got bad regen or something, then just make sure you go and kill yourself off a cliff or something just to get back. Even though you've got damage reduction, it's usually more worth it to be able to progress instead of not being able to progress at all. So yeah, it's kind of a matter of necessity. If you need to do that, then do it, but try and avoid it. Also, you saw in that last section there was a lot of ice. Pretty much follow the path that you saw me take in the video, and that'll get you there. If you have a leap or a dash, usually the best way to do it the first time is to bait them out. Like you saw, I dashed through them to get to the objective, but if you want, instead, if you've got a dash or a leap, just leap back towards your team. Have your team wait for you back on the other bank. Leap back or dash back, and then you can fight them that way. And then you can all go together and then fight them in the cavern, as you saw. Here, this section is pretty much just the same as they were before. Nothing too special here. Yeah, so here we go. Pretty much the only thing you need to be worried about in this section right here in particular is the instant that you kill this guy, a bunch of archers up here. Now, what you normally want to do is you want, in my opinion, you want to go behind that stone block that you saw over there. Ice block, I mean. You want to go behind that, and then let all these archers that come through the door to group up around. That'll make it a lot easier to pull that off, because then you can just slam your AoEs and ult as well. You can use your ult there because of the fact that you'll have your ult up the instant you get on the boat. So, now, things to note with this boss. This boss has several small things that are going to go towards him, that heal him. Pretty much you want your tankiest person to tank him most of the time, if you can. And your Hell or whoever your healer is should heal him. Just throw your ults out at him when you first see him, just because that way you'll have it up again before the fight's over. And you see these little green things that we're running to try and stop. Those will heal the boss about 2,000 each, so you definitely want to avoid that happening. The boss has approximately 30,000 HP, I think it's 32,000. When he gets to 16,000, you see he goes into this form, and we have to destroy his fingers. Now, we're kind of rushing this. What I'd recommend, instead of doing rushing it, is you need to watch out for these waves. Instead of rushing it, you should, like, calm down and just get in the middle or something, like what we're about to do here. and just dodge the waves. And if your Hell has mana, just let her heal for a bit. Don't even bother destroying anything. Just dodge waves for a bit, and you can stall prey easily doing that. Like your Hell can heal you, and all that. The thing you need to be aware of is when you destroy one of the fingers, he does that roar you saw, massive damage to everyone. So do be careful of that. Another thing you have to be aware of is with the waves, they can knock you off. Now, it's something that's about to happen here. He's going to the center. Now, this is when you want to get far away from him if you can. I failed to dash away in time, but when you see him move towards the center, it happens at about 7 or 8,000 HP. He makes that giant whirlpool. The closer you are to the center, the more deadly it is. So, if you're able to get closer to the edge, you should be fine, in theory. When we were first trying to beat this boss, we had such a hard time on that stage because we kept dying over and over, and then we realized that the damage scales on how far you're from the boss. So if you get really far away, it does almost nothing. It really does almost no damage. There's actually a point, I think, on the boat where you're actually completely safe from it in the back, where you literally take 0 damage. But that's difficult to get to really quickly. Again, it happens around 7 or 8,000 HP. I'd lean towards estimating that it happens at 8,000 HP. It might be that we just damaged it more while it was moving to the point. I would estimate it happens at 8,000 HP. For reference, at 8,000 HP or close to 8,000 HP, you guys should be booking it. Get as far away from him as possible. Use your escapes, stuff like that. Also, be aware that before that 8,000 HP threshold arrives, there are going to be those healing things as well, so you gotta stop that. Now, in this new area, the enemies are a lot harder to kill than in the previous area, so the first time you get here, you're gonna have a really hard time. Now, you briefly saw it earlier, you'll see it again later, but there's these little boars that run towards you. They look like Artemis hogs. Or the... no, they look more like... They look more like the boar camps that they used to have in Conquest map before they replaced it with the debuff, buff, whatever you call it, protection reduct buff. Those little guys, you cannot engage in melee range. So, yeah, right there, you just saw one of them. You cannot engage those guys in melee range, or else they will blast you with a bomb from the heavens. Literally, a fireball will come from the heavens and like either destroy a lot of your HP or kill you instantly. So do be very careful about that. As for these mini bosses, with these harpies, you gotta be aware that they have an intoxicate when you're too close to them. It's a knock up and intoxicate, I think. When you're near them, it deals quite a bit of damage, so do be careful about that. Pretty much in this area, you gotta be destroying these pillars. Once you destroy all of them, then the door will open. Now we're just going for the chest back here. This guy will throw out giant lava pools. Do not stand in them. It makes sense. Reasonable. You know, standard stuff. Here's another hog. You notice you want to keep your distance with it. Just all of you keep your distance and attack him and you'll be fine. There's really not much of a threat with those guys. Now you can avoid fighting those guys over there because there's literally no chest there and there's no purpose to fighting them. I don't know why they're there. It's like, it loops around, but there's no point to fighting them there. If you are actually trying to do this for your first time, you probably shouldn't bother. Just don't waste the mana and HP to fight them. Now you want to start out on the left side to kill these archers as quickly as possible because they do deal a lot of damage. And you can also group up the melees with them, potentially. And then the archers are gonna come out again, but this time on the right side, so same deal. If you can group them all up for AoEs, great. Then you'll have 2 archers on each side and 2 melees on each side. I'd say just go to one side, group them up. Now here's where we're stacking minions. You should not do this if you're doing this the first time. Yeah, so you want to group them up and hopefully pull them towards you. And we are discovering why you need to pull them towards you. But yeah, the archers aren't as big of a focus in this case. I'd say just get rid of one group and then the other. And then you want to be careful going into that room because there are a bunch of groups. Now, once you go into this area, there's a phoenix that's firing shots at you that will stun you. We destroyed it very quickly. You can use abilities on it, and you can hit it from range. So if you can destroy it as quickly as possible, it's less of a nuisance for your team. Now, just be aware, in case I didn't mention it before, all these mini bosses will change. Like, the mini bosses in between these sections will change. So do be aware that your run might have different mini bosses at different locations. You might run into none of these lava throwers. You might run into nothing but lava throwers. So do be careful of that. Now, this dog is, I think, the last of the mini bosses in this area. He does that laser sort of flamethrower attack. So do be very careful when he does that, because that deals a ton of damage. So as long as you're either distant enough from him, or you're not in the arc, then you'll be fine. It's pretty short range, so I think if you're at max auto attack range, you should be safe from it. Just you want to be aware of it and either try and stay behind him or stay at a distance from him. Whoever's tanking it, you want to definitely be strafing left and right all the time. And the instant you see him stop and do the flamethrower, you want to be careful. Oh, this is the last of the boss guys. He just calls down fire from the heavens down on you. It's not too hard to juke. If you really want to juke it, you can. It's a bit quick. It doesn't deal a ton of damage, so I'm usually not too worried about it. Even when I was early on, we weren't too worried about those guys. Now, this is the boiler room. This place, you need to be extremely quick with. You will probably not pass this the first time you do it. First things first, Gaga in the center, before the lava shows up like that, you see? The instant you defeat that wave, there, you Gaga in the center. Otherwise, you will die. We learned that the hard way. The first time we did, we all died on that section because we were too busy exploring and not getting in the middle. So you want to follow the route that you see has no water. And you want to go as fast as possible. Now, Hell can really help here because she can give a speed boost and make you immune from all these little spider slows. Like, if you remember the last adventure, there were all those little spiders in the darkness room. That's pretty much the same deal here. But, yeah, time is of the essence. You need to get over there, kill the dam as quickly as possible. You can ult it if you need to. What our soul was doing sometimes, you'll see, I think, later. She would just throw her ult down on the dam and then leave. She had enough power so that it would insta-kill it. You want to make sure it dies, and then you gotta book it. We barely made it that time, and that was even with our builds. So that goes to show trying to kill them is a waste of time. You're always better off trying to just get there as fast as possible and then get out as fast as possible. If one of you dies, then it's quite possible that'll happen. This is where Hell comes in, though. When you're trying to get out, Hell players, you're going to want to throw your CC immunity on as many of your team as you can for the spider slows, and then use your 3, and then all of your teammates need to dash out if they can. Our Hell accidentally got a bit left behind. That was Mathen. He got a bit left behind because he was too busy using his 2 on his teammates. So he was, yeah, right there he should have used his 2 on himself, and he would have gone out. But yeah, you need to run into that and get out that way. Otherwise, you burn in the lava like that. Also, don't worry too much about the waves of enemies that'll chase you. They all die in the lava too. So just be careful. Some of them might actually follow you into the steam and get saved along with you. Just kill them when the steam goes down quickly. But yeah, you want to get past here. I'm busy exploring the store because I'm actually a elitist prick. I'm showing off how invincible I am. Even though I could easily die here. I'm not quite that OP yet. But you see, Soul just ulted it, and that was enough to damage it. Abilities damages just as well as autos. Just be really careful about the spiders stacking up and slowing you. You see, the instant Hell immuned it, we were able to get out fairly easily. So just make sure you keep pace. Get out of there as quickly as possible, and you should be fine. Overall, the boiler room, I think, is one of those things that once you know the setup for doing it, the fact that is that people who try to destroy everything before they get to the dam will probably lose, because it takes way too long. And I'm not sure, but it might actually be infinite respawns for the enemies when you're doing that. So, yeah, just rush to the dam, kill the dam, get out. That's pretty much the way you want to play that out. Now, as for this section, it's an easy run. You've got a few boars coming up. Just kill them at a distance, same as before. No big deal. I don't think these boards are any different from before, but I never got hit by a fireball from these guys, so I wouldn't know. One thing to note is when you're in melee range of these, if you're playing someone like Baka, you can actually just eat the boar, and if you're quick enough on it, it won't actually drop a firebomb on you. I'm not exactly sure of the timing of that, but yeah, anyways. Here's the final boss that's available in PTS. It's the second boss of the adventure. So this middle section, it works the same as every other section of the armor, so don't think that it's any different just because it looks different. So yeah, you're now with this boss, you need to be very careful. You need to swap who's taking the damage. Because he will deal a lot of damage to someone who's taking it all the time. So you see, I swapped with Soul briefly. I'm trying to swap back to me because he throws out those blasts. He also has lava pools like the other bosses do, and you want to avoid those, as always. Now this blast, you notice how I find an empty spot, I go as far away as possible, find an empty spot, and then move slightly to the left every time. That's pretty much all you need to do to be able to consistently dodge that. Just find that empty spot for the first time. You might get hit by the first one. Here, just make sure you're not in the zone of death. If Hell can immune you, that's really good. Or if you have a leap or something, you can leap out of that. So yeah, you see I'm just moving slightly to the left each time, and I'm able to avoid it, except when I'm lazy. I'm trying to hit him while he's doing it. Usually you're better off just trying to dodge it instead of hitting him at the same time. I was just, yeah. Don't mind me. So you want to watch out for those pools. They will form under two people who are close by. Now that spin attack, it's extremely deadly. Make sure you're not close to it when it happens. Either dash or leap out. Now, you notice I'm holding my dash for when he does his next attack like that. Mathen, I think, is in a bit of trouble here. I dashed through it like that. He followed me, so it got him off Mathen. I just hit him a few more times, and we finished the fight. Now, the first time we did that, you had to pay a lot more attention to the mechanics than when we did. Than when we did that time. But once you get a few items online, if you got crit online and similar and raw Tahuti like our soul got lucky enough to get, then it really isn't that difficult to be able to finish those fights, because once you just have sheer overwhelming power, most of these things are easy, at least until hard mode and nightmare mode come out. But for now, pretty much the gist of what you need to know is, with those boss fights, I'd say on the first boss fight, if you've got at least one tier 3 item or a few tier 2 items, and everyone on your team is about that sort of level of items, then you should be able to finish it. If for the second boss, I'd say you need at least over half of your items on everyone in your team being tier 3 items, and at least some of them being decent. However, I will say not all items are created equal. If you've got ADCs who have like triple crit or something, then you're probably gonna pull it off pretty easily, versus an ADC who has like a bunch of defense tank items, you know? So, I mean, it's all put in perspective. Just if you've got decent items, you should be able to put... It's hard for me to put an exact figure on it, but those are my estimates that I'd say. Those are based on when we beat them for the first time, I'd say. I think the only phase that, in my opinion, you can beat without... I think you can beat everything up until the first boss with no items. I think that's possible. It's difficult, but it's possible. You can beat everything up until the first boss with tier 1 items, that's for sure. But yeah, pretty much the first mini-boss, you know, with the gates and such, you just gotta be careful that the person who's doing it knows how to do it. Because if you fall off, then your team has to fight an extra wave, basically. Which really sucks for your team. You'll burn out energy-wise if you don't have your items online, and you're also relying on this person to actually be able to get the bombs done. So do be careful about that. It's overall a fairly easy phase because they do give you pots after every single stage of that phase. So overall, I'd say you can do that even with no items, and we have done it even with no items. It was just To get past the first boss with tier 1s and less, I don't think it's doable. We tried about, I'd say, 10, 15 times to beat it with only tier 1 items before, when they were bugged. Earlier in PTS it was bugged and you couldn't actually get tier 3 items and such. But yeah, we were able to get quite a bit of damage off, but we could never get past the first stage of the boss fight, basically, like when he gets into the water. It's just too difficult because he dealt way too much damage. You can't outmatch that with only tier 1 items. So I'd say you can beat the first boss if you've got like at least one good tier 3 item, or if you've got like a few tier 2 items that are useful, you know, stuff like that. But it's not super difficult. The first boss fight, I think the biggest threat is honestly that whirlpool. We died probably about 10 times on that fight before we were like, oh yeah, the whirlpool deals less damage as you're farther out. So yeah, just make sure you, when that boss hits 8,000, you're out. Alright? As for with the second boss, pretty much it's a lot of switching. You want to switch who the boss is attacking at the time. If you let the boss attack one person constantly, even if they're full tank built, it's gonna be rough, to say the least, because they will be taking a lot of damage. I'm not 100% on this, but I think it might also be possible that the boss's attacks scale in damage the more times he hits someone, because it kind of felt like it did, but it might not be the case. Don't take my word for it on that one. I will say though, overall, if you're running 3 squishies, then just trade the damage out amongst yourselves pretty efficiently. With the first boss, you don't have to do that. The first boss, you can have one person tank it pretty much the whole time. Maybe 2 people at most. But with the last boss, all 3 of you should be tanking it. The first time you do it, all 3 of you should be tanking it at different points in time. Just make sure when he goes to the center, you go closer to the edges so that you can see those fireballs coming. If you got Hell, have her immune you when he does that slam attack with the fire giant, basically line attack in essence. If you guys remember the fire giant's line attack, it's basically that same sort of mechanic except in a star. So your Hell can immune that. That's good for your team. One thing I will say that can catch people off guard, I don't think there was any witness of it in our example for the first boss, but with the first boss, do be careful about stacking up on him. If you've got multiple melee gods, do be very careful, because we have noticed that if you get a lot of melee gods, or if you get a lot of people that get really close to the boss, he does this special explosion attack, which knocks everyone back, deals a ton of damage, and you really should not be anywhere close to him for that, otherwise it will hurt. Aside from that, go out there and knock yourselves out, guys. Anyways, I'm sorry again for my low quality editing. I'm still learning how to do the video editing stuff, but let me know what you guys think. If you guys think I'm wrong on something, please correct me. If I find evidence for your correction, I will immediately add notation in the description. Thank you all for watching. If you like this sort of content, let me know. I'll do more guides in the future if you like it. And I hope you all have a fun time with the adventures mode. As I said before, this isn't complete. It's only the first 2 bosses, but this is something to get you guys started until we figure out what's going on with the 3rd boss. I will probably add an update video to show the space between the 2nd boss and the 3rd boss, so then you can all see exactly how that works. But yeah, I'll upload that. If you want to see that when it comes out, please subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Farewell.